Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're focused on the next Black Swan, making sense of changing markets. My name is Jeff Woodmansey, and I'm president of Slimstock US, and I'll be facilitating the discussion today and introducing our featured guest here in a moment. But for those of you who are not familiar, a little background about Slimstock. We are a global provider of inventory management software with more than 1,000 customers around the world, and we start, on average, a new implementation every other day. Now, despite the size, I believe our CEO is most proud of the fact that year over year, since the company's founding in 1993, we have maintained a customer retention rate better than 96%. Now, the essence of Slimstock, I think, can be summarized in just one line. We aim for the right stock at the right place at the right time. And from the functional areas you see below, from forecasting over to order optimization, that's how we make it happen. Now, my job is working with customers and prospective customers to help them reach their inventory goals. And knowledge, of course, is a big piece of that journey, which is why we asked Kim Olesen, the Director of Supply Chain at Vallen, Canada, to highlight some of her experiences for us. And I will let Kim share a little bit more about herself and about Vallen.
Thanks, Jeff. Really thrilled to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a real ride lately with the pandemic, and I'm hoping I can share with the audience what we've learned to date. So I've been in supply for many, many years and in a senior role for the last 10 plus. I've been with Vallen and for almost 3 years, and this is a whole distribution company. And my background has been varied in supply, so anywhere from chemical production, electronics production and distribution, to full distribution. And every day is a learning experience. There's no doubt about it. So when I say I'm a professional, you know, it's good to learn every day, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So yeah, so I just thought I'd share a little bit about what Vallen does, if that's all right. And so Vallen is a leading Canadian distributor of indirect materials, safety equipment, PPE, and MRO items. So if you can appreciate when we're talking about safety, gloves, respirators, in the news, you've heard a lot about N95s, and this is exactly what's been going on with the pandemic, and those items have been very hot commodities. And so we're going to share a little bit about what we've learned and what we've gone through. Vallen belongs to the Sonepar company. The Sonepar company is a privately owned organization, 48,000 employees worldwide in 48 countries. 145 operating entities, and Vallen is the safety industrial component. The rest of the operating opcos in Sonepar are basically electronic based, and within Sonepar there's over 3,000 different branches. Vallen itself, what we do is we just don't sell products, but we also sell solutions. So we also sell, you know, safety services, as in mobile services, rental programs, compliance programs, equipment reporting, and servicing. And we also have a whole different inventory offer related to mobile warehousing, vendor managed inventory, and also vending. So it's a very, very interesting business, and that's when I say that every day is the learning experience. I thought that I had experienced it all until I got into distribution, and especially in distribution today. So Vallen itself, Vallen Canada, so there's Vallen Canada, Vallen US, and Vallen Mexico. Together we form the North American group. Vallen Canada, we have 400 plus employees. 26 branches, and our customer base spans mining, oil and gas, construction, utilities, and manufacturing. So we're pretty broad-based here.
Wow, yes. Okay. So today, we talk about the Black Swan, and we certainly feel like the current pandemic qualifies, but there are other events over time that have happened in the past and certainly will happen in the future that will probably require some sort of contingency plan for an event like this. Now, our discussion today will be very conversational in the form of a Q&A. We've allotted some time at the end for questions, and if you can do me a favor and put those questions either in the chat box or the question box, that would be terrific, and we will get to as many of them as we can. And if for some reason there are too many, we will take those questions and put those in the summary that will follow up with you, each of you, mid next week. And we'll be talking about lessons learned, making decisions with uncertainty, communication, planning as it relates to the assortment and geography, and then ultimately, are we ready, or what does it take to be ready for the next Black Swan? So our first question for Kim is, over the last number of months, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. What have been some of the lessons that you've learned managing the supply group at Vallen that you will take forward with you?
Great question. So, when I mentioned that we service oil and gas, we're very predicated on shutdowns, and that's when oil and gas companies shut down different parts of their processes to do their maintenance tune-ups. And coming into 2020, we were prepared for the shutdown season of all times. So at the end of 2019, we finished our massive implementation of Slim4, and we had the tools in place to be able to forecast what this shutdown season was going to look like for us. So we did our homework, we did all our investigation, and we were prepared for once to be ahead of the curve and to be a very responsive and strategic supply team. And something happened called COVID. So we were sitting at very, very high inventory levels. We had prepared in the safety area and tooling area for about a 30% uptake in revenue, and that didn't happen. So there are a lot of lessons that we've learned and we continue to learn. So the first thing is we realized that our inventory wasn't moving. And we always came into, we had this idealistic goal of turning our inventory 6 times a year. And we've learned that, perhaps that's just not very ideal in these types of circumstances. So we're really learning that in a pandemic type of situation where it's great to have some product lines and some product categories in regular business that can turn that way, there's a core group of products that maybe you want to build in a little bit more, I'm going to call it fat, into your inventory. So your core list of inventories where you don't want to run them down. Obviously we can't afford to sit on millions and millions of dollars of excess inventory, but maybe we need to build a playbook, identify some of those core items that would be impacted by a pandemic, and we know what they are now, and who knew toilet paper would be one of them. So yeah, it goes beyond and it was paper towels and everything where we ran out because who could predict that our customers would go into panic buy mode? And again, we're not servicing retail customers, we're servicing industrial customers. So the first thing that we realized was that 6-turn goal for inventory isn't ideal. And you know what else? Perhaps our obsolescence rules corporately weren't ideal for this type of situation that we're experiencing this year. So the first thing that I wanted to impart was know what your core items are. And in a pandemic and in a playbook situation, maybe look at creating a different set of KPIs for that, and look at them a little differently, and maybe strip them out from the KPIs for the rest of your inventory. The other thing that we learned was ensuring that we had adequate supply channels. So when our tier 1 manufacturers, and we thought we were being proactive, we started making phone calls to our manufacturers, you know, are you impacted yet? Everybody said no, you know, and as the wave hit across the water and then made its way to North America, it was, oh gosh, everybody's, oh gosh, panic buys happening. Nobody really knew how they were being impacted. And then the impact started to happen. We couldn't get supply. We had things flying off our shelves. We realized that maybe we didn't have any tier 2 suppliers properly vetted and ready to go. So that was a challenge for us. And so that's when you learn how to be creative. You have a manufacturer vetting process, but maybe it needs to look a little bit different in your playbook for a pandemic. And make sure that now we're working on it, make sure that we know who our best alternatives are, and to develop those relationships and make sure that we're covered across the board on everything. So that's that playbook, making sure that we have and we're ready, and we're still living it now. There are raw material shortages for what we're selling. Nitrile is one of them. You know, medical is pulling on, and rightly so, the medical gloves, nitrile gloves for day-to-day, and then we've got the industrial side. And the governments have legislated to protect, obviously, medical, personal, and then industrial, but we have to keep the plants going too. So we're really trying to figure out how do we get our fair share, and it's been working stressfully. We do get allocated product, but we weren't prepared for how to allocate product in our systems, in our ERP systems, in Slim4. We weren't prepared for that allocation, and how are we going to run it? So, you know, those rules we need to work through and make sure we're prepared for that in the future. And then also what impacted us, you know, number 4, our order policies on item. What are you going to set up if you're having to do heroics to bring in new inventory parts? For example, face masks, not a core, we never sold them. I mean, N95s, yes, for industrial use, but the surgical masks, we had decided we're going to stock them, or are they going to be order as needed? And that all impacts what happens to your inventory numbers, your inventory turnover, and your KPIs. So you have to know how you're going to approach this. So those are some of the key learnings that we've had through this whole pandemic.
Okay, great. Now, this pandemic has created, and unfortunately continues to create, uncertainty. How do you tell your team, given all this uncertainty, how to make purchases, and then what factors to think about when making the purchases?
Well, the first thing that happened, Jeff, and another great question, we had to make sure everybody was on the same page within our department. You know, Vallen, we have a couple things going on. We have our centralized purchasing area, and then we also, our branches have the ability to buy non-stock items. And so we had to make sure that as we set policy, as we decided what we were bringing in, new items to replace some of our key items, for example, Lysol wipes, Clorox wipes, toilet paper. We had to make sure, right, all the substitutes we had to go through very quickly. We had to make sure that everybody was on the same page, and we didn't have, you know, people going off and doing their own. So the very first thing we did to make sure everybody knew what was going on, we centralized all of the items that we called COVID related. And we actually set up a separate category for COVID, and we called them coronavirus high-risk items. So we centralized that very quickly to control who was buying what the needs were, and with the ultimate goal of really trying to service our clients to the best of our ability, and to make sure we had one voice working with each of the suppliers, and not having to manage any other noise from our colonies, if you will. So we did that, and that was really good. And then we realized that we needed to really, again, we set up that separate product line and rework our dashboards, because in Slim 4, you know, we have our regular items, and then we had the items that had gone on allocation and were really showing very poor service levels for us and fill rates. So we decided right away to split those out and to start measuring. We froze our database, then we split out. We took one picture in time as what the whole inventory health looked like. Then we split it out to manage this high-risk group along with the regular inventory side of things. And we made sure that we put forecast collections in place, that we were looking at the forecasts that changed by plus or minus 5%, and then the ones that were really erratic, changing by plus or minus 35%. And then our planners and our purchasers are planned, if they see anything that might be an anomaly, they would reach out and call that business unit owner to find out what was going on, so that we could make really, really good purchasing decisions. Some of the other outlying factors that are truly important in a pandemic, and we've lived the whole pandemic, face mask, the whole piece about counterfeit, it's been in the news. We've lived through it. We had many, many, many sleepless nights wondering if we did the right thing. And you know, that whole supply and demand curve was in play. High demand, low supply, you're paying exorbitant amounts of money for these masks, extremely long lead times. When we first air freighted in our first masks, the air freight costs were extremely high. And you have to be very, very careful, because if you buy too high and you bring too much inventory in and the market price drops, which it did because face masks are now at pre-COVID pricing, you could get stuck with a lot of high-priced inventory that customers are not prepared to pay, which could be a loss for companies. So you really got to be careful, and you've got to be able to predict demand in an environment that is completely unpredictable, and your customers don't know either.
And you said that terms had been changed even too. You were having to pay up front instead of, so working capital gets affected.
Working capital, we had to pay in some instances 50% up front. This was an anomaly for Sonopar Canada. I think for Sonopar in general, we had to figure out an approval route pretty quick. It happened very quickly. Again, it's risk. You're assuming risk with manufacturers that you haven't dealt directly with before. You've got to make sure that the decisions you're making on those substitute products, that the sales team have had input in it. Your customers are hesitant to buy because it's not a Kimberly-Clark item. It might be a different item, so everybody's hesitant there. So many market dynamics, which we've just shared. The counterfeiting, having your team work from home. It's not like you can get up from your desk and just go say, hey, what do you think about that? Because I'm exceptional at interrupting people at their desks. Now you got to call, and they might be on another call. So that adds something different and really important. One of the big factors is what's going on in the geopolitical environment. The DPA has impacted our business greatly. We're trying to do an import now for gloves that are medical grade, and there's a whole lot of regulations, and the regulations are changing, maybe not daily, but they are changing weekly. But the regulations between China and Canada, with all of the dynamics there, they're changing daily. Actually, with some masks that we thought we were going to get out, there's been now another delay. They're going for repackaging a third time because the rules and regulations are changing, and this is our daily life.
Oh,
if that paints
wonderful.
a picture.
Yes, yes. So, and you touched on a couple of these things. So with the uncertainty that compounds that, you have people working at home, all these factors you just mentioned, how did the communication change both internally within Vallen and then to your suppliers and customers?
Well, that's when you know that in order to stay ahead of this and to be the best that we could be for our customers, and to be successful as Vallen, we just realized that we had to communicate and over communicate. So we started communicating with the sales leadership every day. And then we made sure that we took some of the items that we needed, the territory managers and the other sales teams and the business development people, then we brought them in to help us make decisions. Then we brought in the branches, and then we brought in all of the customer service representation so that we made sure that we were all on, and our category managers, our inventory planners, our buyers, everybody was a part of this to know where we were going, where we were having challenges. So, you know, we were meeting with these groups up to 3 times a week, and in some cases 3 and 4 meetings a day, and so that we could all keep communicating. And sometimes it wasn't enough; people still didn't get the message. And sometimes people need to hear things 7 times in order for it to stick. So we started all of these communication groups and teams just so we could stay all united and we could work collaboratively together, and it worked very, very, very well. And we're taking that now. We're continuing on. We've dialed back on some of those meetings, but they're certainly there. In communications with suppliers, this is where you need to be very, very good at communicating. It's not enough to hide behind an email. An email with a supplier, in my mind, is not a strong relationship. You still have to pick up the phone, be on camera with that vendor, because we found in one of our product lines that we were buying retail product when we had a whole offer of industrial products to us. And, you know, we talked about the difference between retail and industrial. So we had available to us a set of products we didn't know. So you've got, as a product manager, you've got to be able to know your sources, know what your options are, stay close to the suppliers and manufacturers, and really, really develop those really strong relationships.
So in that case, you don't have to compete against the retail market. You can just compete against the industrial market for those particular products. That's nice.
In this case as well, and in some cases, yes, absolutely. Safety is a little different, so the PPE, not so much, but yeah.
Okay. Well, since it's a Friday afternoon, we'll see if we can engage the audience a little bit and distribute a poll. With our audience today, 33% were very confident in the response, 45% somewhat confident, which is the most, 14% not confident, and 5% or a little bit less than 5% were terrified. So that's good. It seems like the majority of companies had at least something in place to work with as this pandemic has unfolded and caused all sorts of trouble across many, many markets. All right, well, thank you for answering that one. And we will, again, have another one here as a follow-up in just a couple more minutes. Next question for Kim. As a business serving both the construction industry and the oil and gas industry, we certainly don't always follow in sync. What strategies does your team employ to stock for project-related demand, as well as the regular ebbs and flows of everyday business?
So it's basically, it's a paradigm shift for us right now. But pre-Slim 4, and actually today we use something called a T-min, a threshold minimum, that was set by the branches, and they would decide how much inventory they needed to hold. We're shifting away from that now. So for everyday business, it's shifting from a threshold minimum to now our planning curves, the demand curves. And, you know, when you set a threshold minimum, or another word is insurance stock, that doesn't respond very well to the project demand, Jeff, that you were asking me about.
Right.
So when we go into shutdown mode, the projects are very big, and from the safety side of things and the tool side of things, headcount on a shutdown could be 3,000 laborers, and as you can appreciate, every one of them has to have all of the PPE, the gloves, the helmets, the breathing apparatus, the harnesses, the fall protection harnesses, So at the beginning what we're doing now is we build a curve, a demand curve that we can easily load through Slim4 into, and it as we think the project is going to ebb and flow,
right.
And that allows us to buy heavy up front and then start as the project is winding down. It dials back on the inventory needs. So but we're shifting right now. We're going from that insurance inventory where everybody just guesses to a more well thought out forecast type of system. And this is completely different for us in the distribution business, because typically it's whatever your customer wants, we buy, and that's great. But if we want to service our customer well, we need to have the product on the shelf and ready for them, and we need a little bit of feedback and a little bit of dialogue about, okay, what are they using? What's going on in their world? And that's really important to be able to make sure we've got the right inventory at the right time.
Okay. Now, you're located in Canada, one of the biggest countries in the world geographically. You have stocking locations as far west as roughly Vancouver and as far east as St. John's, Newfoundland, which I did some math, is 4,150 miles, 6,700 kilometers, or I looked it up, 75 hours by car, according to Google. So how do you manage supplying your wide assortment that we've talked about so far over such a geography, and also accounting for all the regional differences in between?
Right, and there are regional differences because, for sure, because we have completely different weather patterns across Canada, and we sell rainwear and winter clothing and toques, and preparing for that is quite interesting. So what we do is we review the spend data across all those 26 branches often, and we're making sure that we are buying direct. When we can meet a prepaid minimum for a vendor, we're making sure that we are using the most economic model to get that product to that branch. And where we can't meet prepaid minimums, then we go back and negotiate better deals. Or we go back and start using some of the mini hubs that we have across Canada to see if we can inventory and stock there, just to mitigate some of the freight charges across Canada. One of the really important things of Slim4, and I know it's a work in progress right now, we're really excited about the network optimization tool that's being developed, because that will look at every hub of inventory that we have, freight rates loaded, and that's going to help us optimize across Canada where best to supply and source from. And we're working through that now, and really, really happy about that. In terms of regional differences, you've got the weather changes, and you've got the, in our business, regional areas love to have their own tools, and they support certain manufacturers. So this is also a challenge for a distribution company, because you want to keep that inventory healthy. So this is where, and we're working through this as well, and it's very, very fun. This is where you start looking at all your tail spend across Canada to find who's buying what. You have to work with the business development people who work very closely with their customers and influence a different buy, and to start consolidating some of that vendor spend, because if we can manage costs across the network more effectively, we can provide a better service as well for our customers. So Absolutely. It can be challenging at times, for sure.
Okay. You said at the outset that you've been in various flavors in industrial distribution for quite some time, almost 3 years now at Vallen. What's the biggest supply chain challenge you faced since you've been at Vallen? And of course, how did you solve that?
So yeah, coming from manufacturing and then a small distribution channel partner. So now we are a channel partner. I had no idea that the business could be as complicated as it is. So many different levers. It's been awesome. Really enjoying it. And the biggest challenge was I couldn't believe the SKU proliferation. over 31,000 stocking items, not counting the number of skulls we have. It's crazy. And so the biggest challenge, and is to make sure, do we have the right things in stock to keep that inventory healthy? Is it healthy? Is it moving? Why isn't it moving? What's changed in our customer base that things aren't moving the way they were? The way we quote on contracts and the commitments we make, it all adds a layer of complication to our business. So absolutely, the SKU proliferation and trying to get our inventory and our KPIs healthy and working in the right direction, while absolutely providing the best, better in class service to our customers, because it's all about fill rate. And we had an ERP system where all that planning was very, very manual, and Slim4 has automated that for us. We brought our branches on live February this year, just before everything hit. And thank goodness, because now we have beautiful dashboards that can help us make decisions faster. And we can look at things that are anomalies rather than having to chunk through line items by line items for all those SKUs at all those branches. So, I think that was my biggest challenge. I knew I was going to have to work hard, and I'm not above hard work. And it's been great. It's been really great.
Good. Your portfolio, all these 31,000 items, come from a variety of places, and because you're so spread out, how do you handle the variety of lead times combined with the reliability of the inbound lead times for product? And then how much of a headache did COVID add to that?
So when you convert to a tool like Slim4, and perhaps you're in you want to get your cutover finished as quick as you can, and you know what parameters need to be clean when you go on a planning system. Perhaps we didn't spend as much time as we could have on making sure that our lead time data was clean. So when you've got that, and now you layer on COVID, you're obviously going to have lead time variations, and we're working through that now. So what happened was, our lead time hasn't been clean. We have a beautiful tool now, the lead time variation report, and now we're working through, in order, when you now have a pair of safety glasses that used to take 5 days to get and now it's 50, you obviously have to up your inventory to bridge that gap. First, understand what is causing that, and it's demand. Low supply, high demand, and then now you've got to bring in that inventory to be able to buffer through that, and really hard to be doing it after the fact and after a pandemic has started. So that's one of the things you have to look at. So the lead time variation it has to be crisp. You have to know what your lead times are, and you have to negotiate better lead times where you can, so that you can keep your inventory optimized. So yes, we started measuring it because now we have the tool to measure it. We had some opportunities there to begin with, and then it got layered on. Now we have all of this outrageous demand. Our demand in some areas has increased by 200%, and now our lead times have gone out, from 5 days to 50 days and even more. So it absolutely is a challenge, and it's really important to be able to go through your AA items and make sure that you've got inventory in place to be able to work through that, to keep your service levels high.
Okay. Now we've been in this pandemic for several months. What do you see as the challenges as we continue to make our way through?
So I think one of the first challenges is making sure that you've got reliable sources of supply, including manufacturers. We have a situation happening now where our manufacturers had tier 1 nitrile glove factories. Right now, and they had contracts in place. Right now, what's happening is it's going to the highest bidder. So if somebody from a different, if a manufacturer, one of our tier 1 suppliers has an order on a manufacturer, they're being bumped, or their order is being redirected to somebody who's paid a higher price. We're dealing with different countries. When is the next border going to close? All of this is a challenge, because today, perhaps the border in India is open and they're a huge glove manufacturing area, and tomorrow they're closed because their numbers have gone high and they've had to shut down the country. So this is all a challenge because nothing is what it seems. So you've got your raw material shortages. You've got maybe communication challenges. Are you dealing with countries that are, ahead of us, behind us? It's not like you can pick up the phone and get an answer right away. And I think the biggest challenge is forecasting. Who knows? We're selling some of our product lines at 200% over what we did last year. The manufacturers can't keep up. The U.S. puts a DPA in place that might prevent some of the material coming to Canada. You just don't know. And our customers know as much as we do. They don't know whether they're going to have full headcount in tomorrow. They don't know if their shutdowns are going to be smaller or whether they're going to do them next year. Nobody, it's the uncertainty. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is the uncertainty. And how do you prepare for that without bringing in so much inventory that it's just not in the best interest of the company and financially.
Right. Okay. We've got one more question for the group now. Again, sort of a follow-up of the first one. How prepared are you, or how prepared is your organization for another disruption? All right. So 75% of the respondents either have a plan or are working on one now. I guess that doesn't surprise me given the gravity of the situation, and certainly a number of Kim's response as far as waking people up and driving people crazy. I'll be glad myself when this is settled down a bit more. All right, for the benefit of the participants, what would you say are the 3 best practices or 3 tips to mitigate risk, especially if there's a second wave or something else comes up here in the near term?
So I think all three items and tips are going to be crucial to your playbook and your business contingency plan. Identify your core products. Make sure you know the products that you just can't run out of. And the number 2 point is to revisit their inventory strategies. Because if you're a distributor, the distributors that have inventory are going to get the business. If you don't have inventory, you're not going to get the business, particularly through the pandemic. So, really make those decisions widely, and develop strong tier 2 suppliers and manufacturers. Have more than your plan A. Have a plan B in place and be buying from them still often, so that you've got that relationship developed, and your tier 2s are always wanting more. So I think those are my 3 biggest tips. And of course, 4th one, communication.
Ah, yes, of course.
Internally, externally.
Did you say you had a fun experience with one of the tier 2 suppliers with toilet paper, or am I mistaken?
No, we did. So again, who knew that people would start panic buying? And in that product stream, we do, industrial does compete with retail. And who knew that we would run out? And so we had to go do some reverse, what'd you call it? We had to go find somebody who was, we saw it in a lot of news clips where people who produce this now, so beer, so all of your distilleries were now producing hand sanitizer. So we've lived through that. We've done that. And we've made some good decisions, and we've made some not good some not good decisions. And then toilet paper. So we found a guy who was willing to go find another manufacturer, and we waited a long time to get that toilet paper in. And part of the challenge is when you have customers that are so brand loyal, doesn't matter if they're out. They're not sometimes willing to look at a different brand, right? They're willing to, I don't know, don't ask me how, how did they end up bridging their gap? Well, because they wouldn't take the tier 2 that we brought in, and we're working through that now. So it's funny, you know, the brand loyalty plays into it. Just because you've brought in a hand sanitizer, and it's replacing one of your main products, doesn't mean that the customers are going to buy it. What's the price? What do you know about it? What's the smell like? It's all very personal still. So you have to be careful. So that's why it's really important that when you are vetting new product to replace your substitutes, to replace your core lines, that sales and your customers have to be involved in those decisions. Otherwise, you're going to bring in inventory and not be able to sell it. And we also had an instance when we brought in hand sanitizer, approved by Health Canada, and then Health Canada changed the regulations the next day. And so this is everything that you're dealing with as a distributor. And, you know, to be quite honest, unless somebody can help me here, I'm not sure you can plan for that. When the regulations are changing day to day, it's difficult to plan for all of those changes in legislation as well. So
the rules changing daily, yes, that makes it difficult or impossible, I think.
Yeah.
We've had you've answered a number of questions and provided a variety of insight. I certainly have learned a few things. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, there's a couple key points that are really important. We've been really successful because throughout the whole pandemic, we've been very nimble. So we were quick to see we were experiencing a challenge here. So what could we do? What were all our alternatives, and work through and vet all of these alternatives to getting product approval from our customers. So you have to be nimble. You have to pre-plan and have that playbook ready. The nimble, you've got to be able to look at your financial and economic indicators to show if they're trending negative and the risk of trending negative. So you need to live and start working with risk-based thinking. You know, and watch the markets and what you're paying for items that might not be your core. For example, the face masks, I use that example where if you buy high and now the market has a lot of supply, the market price drops, you haven't sold through, you're stuck with masks that you're going to have to take a loss on. So, you know, you have to be very, very careful and watch what's going on in the markets. So that risk-based thinking is really, really important. And the other item to watch for is all of the opportunities that can arise from all of the situations. So, you know, maybe the face mask, cloth masks are going to be a product line for us going forward, depending on what happens with this pandemic. So there are always, there's always silver lining and always other opportunities when things that are not so good face us. So always remember that, to look for those opportunities. Communication internally, externally is really, really important. So external, outside the supply chain, so with our sales, our business development people, our branches, and then beyond that with our customers. You know, that's really, really key. And I can't stress enough, it's the good relationships that you have with your suppliers and your customers that will take you far.
Get out from behind the email, I think you said. I think that's a great way of putting it. Okay, well, certainly a big thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, talk to the audience, for your thoughtful answers. I'm going to check for the questions here in just a moment, but I thought I'd cover what's on the screen. If you want to know a little bit more about Kim or about Slimstock. In Canada, you can contact Ali, and his email is there. Or in the US, you can contact Jeff at that email there as well. We'd love to have you follow us on LinkedIn so the communication can continue as we have conversations there. Our website is there. And then, as I mentioned at the outset, we'll follow up with you midweek next week with a summary of what you saw, so you have something to take with you. Let's see, let me look at the questions both in the chat and the question box. Let me see if I can. How has Slimstock adjusted to COVID with you as both support and as a tool? So how has Slimstock helped on the support side as well as the tool side dealing with this in this pandemic time, since you're relatively new with it?
Oh, that's a really good question. So from the support side from Slimstock, we have a channel where we reach out daily to every participant from Slimstock that we've worked with from the onset of the project through the blueprinting phase, development phase. That dialogue is ongoing, so it's been second to none. And through that dialogue and through the Slim4, we're developing and making changes and tweaks and coming up with different needs in the Slim4 tool itself as we go along. So, you know, making sure we knew how to set up a collection. This is how you manage some of the workflow for a planner, how you set up a collection to look for forecast, to look for demand that might have changed plus or minus 35% compared to a different time period. So we've been able to tweak Slim4 to help us do that, and then to come up with the idea that we needed to freeze some of the data. That's all been collaboration between our project manager, our team, and Slimstock. And then realizing quite quickly that I laugh because you would think I would know better. And I'm just human, and our teams we're just human, and we're learning here that, boy, our KPIs were really not doing very well. So maybe we need to strip the COVID-related items out of that group and that measurement. And that involves Slim4 to be able to measure the success of the rest of the business without that piece. So we've been able to adapt Slim4 along with the support. It's a collaboration, and it's a collective effort between the two of us, and it's ongoing. We're already looking at the next phase. Some of you might already be on the next phase, and we're looking at getting there right now, probably in the last part of this year. So we need to stabilize a little bit first, get our lead time variabilities working for us so we can get our service levels up. So it's been good.
Excellent, glad to hear it. Another question for you. How do you keep people motivated and communicating in a stressful work environment?
Oh, really good question. And some of my team is on this call, so I'm hoping that they agree. So we made sure that we had the first piece for us is not everybody had VPN, so the ability to work from home. We didn't have enough licenses. IT was awesome. Sonopar Canada IT, we got all the licensing in place very, very quickly. And then you knew, as a leader, I knew that I had to reach out as a group. So we started having coffee break meetings daily. And all we talked about was really not business. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Tell me something exciting. We met some of our staff members that have young children. They were part of our calls. So we got to meet them. They did show and tells for us. So we had that real human piece happening on a daily basis on top of the business meetings that we needed to have. It's no doubt it takes a lot of effort to keep the communication lines open. But it was kind of fun for us, and not everybody handled what we all lived through and are living through the same way. So, you know, it's important as a leader to have the empathy that you need to understand that maybe it's not bothering you, but it might be somebody else. And we had a lot of people that a lot of their partners and spouses lost their jobs or were laid off as well. So it's you know, you have to look at everything. And plus, we have to understand that now we're all back in the office here right now, but we couldn't all come back at the same time because people needed to figure out what they were doing with daycare because daycares hadn't opened yet. So you need to be flexible as an employer, and I think we have been. And now we have such stringent regulations on COVID testing that you might be here and then you might have a symptom, and so you're working from home for the next 14 days, and we're good with that. It's good. It's all good. It's
ready.
Flexibility. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Did your ERP or Slimstock help more during the COVID rush?
Slimstock did. Yeah, because that's the dashboard for all of the planning. Slim4 was the tool that showed us when we were, you know, there's so many different things you can do with it. It's mind-boggling. And that was the tool that we could put in some rules to say, okay, if our demand has increased by 35%, we want a list. What items now, and we build a collection that says, okay, what items haven't come in and are past their due dates. You can lay your workflow out in there as a buyer, as a planner, as a category manager, or some of you might know a category manager, product manager. You know what you need to look at every day to set the stage for your day. That tool is what really got us through. We didn't have the level of visibility nor the resources required to work through our current ERP system because it was the planning cycle was very, very manual and was only done only updated and done once a month.
Looks like we hit all of the questions, but there were about a half dozen in here saying thank you, Kim. Very interesting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'll echo my sentiments once again. Thank you for spending the time with us. And then if I look out at the broader audience, of course, again, late on a Friday before a weekend, before a 3-day weekend for some of you, thank you for joining us. We certainly appreciate you being here. We'll get back with you middle of next week. Have a relaxing weekend or have a relaxing 3-day weekend. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Jeff, for the opportunity. Thanks, everybody.